The ballroom held its breath as Brenna Olson danced alone. 300 faces watched from the shadows, human and vampire both, packed into the underground hall that stretched beneath the old quarter of Seattle. Chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, their crystals catching the candlelight and throwing it back in fractured gold. The music played on, a waltz written for two, and Brenna moved through the steps with a partner made of air and desperation. Her grandfather was supposed to be here. He had taught her these steps in his living room, counting out the rhythm with his cane against the hardwood floor. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and his hand steady on her waist, guiding her through turns she would need to know when the time came. The time had come 5 weeks after they buried him, and she was dancing the human measure alone because there was no one else left who knew the steps, no one else from the sworn bloodline who could stand in that ballroom and renew the compact that had kept peace between the court and the city for 3 centuries. She stumbled on a turn. Someone in the gallery whispered. The sound carried in the awful silence between the phrases of music, and Brenna felt heat climb her neck, but she kept moving. Her dress was her grandmother's, altered to fit, deep blue silk that whispered against the marble floor. She had pinned her dark hair up herself, and already pieces were coming loose. The compact required a partnered dance. The old laws were specific about that. 1 human of the Olson line, 1 vampire representative of the court. 3 dances performed under witness before midnight on the winter solstice. If the measure went unfinished, the compact lapsed. If the compact lapsed, the old hunting rights revived. She had read the terms in her grandfather's study, written in ink that had faded to brown on parchment that cracked at the edges. She would not be the reason it failed. She would not be the one who broke 300 years of peace because she could not find a vampire willing to dance with her. She had asked. She had gone to the court 3 weeks ago, escorted by the city's liaison, and made her petition in the Hall of Audiences. She had asked formally, correctly, using the words her grandfather had written down for her. The court had listened in silence. No one had volunteered. The king had said nothing at all, only watched her from his seat with eyes like winter fog, pale and cold and entirely unreadable. So she danced alone. The music swelled. She moved through the second figure, arms extended to hold a partner who was not there. She could feel them watching. The vampires stood along the eastern wall, white-haired and beautiful, their faces smooth as porcelain. They wore formal dress, all dark fabrics and old-fashioned cuts, and they did not move except to breathe. The humans clustered on the western side, uncomfortable in their best clothes, trying not to stare too obviously at the creatures who had lived beneath their city since before the city had a name. Brenna turned, lost her place, found it again. The waltz had 3 dances. She was halfway through the first. Her feet hurt. She had practiced until her legs shook, alone in the studio she had rented by the hour, because her apartment was too small and she needed to learn the spatial awareness, the way the steps would feel in a real ballroom. But practicing alone and performing alone were different things, and she was exhausted and furious and so afraid she could taste it. The music ended. Silence fell like a weight. She stood in the center of the floor, breathing hard, waiting. The tradition allowed 1 minute between dances. She could hear the clock on the far wall ticking. 59 seconds, 58. Movement from the dais. Everyone turned. The king was standing. He was tall, taller than any vampire she had seen, and he moved with the kind of grace that made everything around him look clumsy. His hair was white as frost, pulled back from a face that might have been carved from marble. He wore black, unrelieved and severe, and when he descended the steps to the floor, the crowd parted without a sound. Brenna stared. The king had not left the dais in living memory. The king did not dance. The king did not involve himself in the measure except to preside over it, a formality required by the compact's terms. He crossed the floor. The candlelight caught in his eyes, pale gray edged with silver. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Your Majesty," she managed. Her voice came out hoarse. He extended his hand. She looked at it, looked back at his face. His expression had not changed. He might have been offering to help her across a puddle or asking her to walk into a fire. She could not tell. The musicians raised their instruments. Brenna put her hand in his. His skin was cool and smooth, his grip careful. He placed his other hand on her waist, and she felt the steadiness in him, the absolute control. The music began. He led her into the first step, and it was nothing like dancing with her grandfather. He moved like water, like silk, and she struggled to follow, her body too slow and too warm and too human. "Relax," he said. His voice was low, barely audible over the music. "I don't know how," she said honestly. Something flickered in his eyes. It might have been amusement. "Follow me," she tried. He guided her through the turns with pressure so light she almost missed it, adjustments so subtle she only understood them after her body had already responded. They moved across the floor, and the crowd watched. And Brenna stopped thinking about the steps and let herself be led. The second dance ended. He did not release her. The third began, faster and more complex, and she felt herself beginning to understand the rhythm, the way he anticipated the music and moved a half-step ahead of it. Her dress fanned out as they turned. His hand stayed steady on her waist. The final notes sounded. They stopped in the center of the floor, exactly where they had begun. The king stepped back and bowed, a formal inclination that spoke of centuries she could not imagine. Brenna curtsied, shaking. Applause broke like a wave. The liaison was already moving toward them, relief written across his face. The crowd pressed closer, humans and vampires both, and the tension that had wound through the room released all at once into noise and motion. The king turned and walked back to the dais without a word. Brenna stood there, still feeling the ghost of his hand on her waist, and wondered what exactly had just happened. The liaison reached her, a thin man in his 50s named Marcus, and grabbed her arm. "That was incredible. Do you have any idea what he just did? Danced with me? Bound himself personally to the compact. The rite doesn't specify the court, it specifies the partner. When the king takes the floor, he's not representing the throne, he's participating as himself. His person is now tied to the terms of the renewal." Brenna looked up at the dais. The king had resumed his seat. He sat with perfect stillness, his hands resting on the arms of his chair, his gaze fixed on something she could not see. "Why would he do that?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "I have no idea." The formal reception happened in another hall, smaller and warmer, with tables set for dinner and wine already poured. Brenna moved through it in a daze, shaking hands and accepting congratulations from people whose names she immediately forgot. The vampires kept to their side of the room, the humans kept to theirs. It was an old habit, reinforced by centuries of careful distance. She found a chair in a corner and sat, pulling her shoes off under the table. Her feet were blistered. She had danced in these heels for 3 hours yesterday, practicing, and her body was punishing her for it now. "You danced well." She looked up. A vampire stood beside her table, a woman with white hair braided down her back and eyes the color of amber. She wore a gown that looked like it belonged in a museum, layers of dark velvet and lace, and she held herself like someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Thank you," Brenna said carefully. "I am Lilith. I serve on the Council of Elders." The vampire inclined her head slightly. "We were impressed by your determination. I didn't want to be the one who broke the compact." "Yes, that was clear." Lilith's gaze moved across the room, settling briefly on the far corner where the king stood alone, holding a glass he had not touched. His Majesty's decision was unexpected. Brenna said nothing. She was learning that silence was sometimes safer than honesty. "The renewal negotiations will begin in January," Lilith continued. "The dance establishes the compact's continuation, but the terms must still be ratified. There will be committees, discussions. It can take time." "How much time?" "The last renewal took 16 months. Brenna blinked. "I thought the dance was the renewal." "The dance is the opening ceremony. The treaty that governs relations between the court and the city is rather more complex." Lilith smiled, showing teeth that were a shade too white. "You will be expected to attend, as the human representative." "Me? You are the sworn keeper now. Your grandfather held the position for 40 years. I'm a graduate student. I study urban planning." "Then you will bring a useful perspective." Lilith's smile did not waver. The first meeting is scheduled for January 7th at 7 in the evening. The court will send an escort to collect you." She walked away before Brenna could respond, gliding across the floor to join a cluster of vampires near the door. Brenna looked around for Marcus and found him deep in conversation with a vampire in old-fashioned formal wear. Everyone seemed to know what was happening except her. She felt like she had stumbled into a play halfway through and missed all the important scenes. She slipped out of the reception as soon as she could, retrieving her coat from the attendant and making her way through the corridors that led back to the surface. The court was built into the hillside beneath the old quarter, a network of halls and chambers carved from stone and lit with candles that never seemed to burn down. She had been here 3 times now, and she still could not navigate it without help. She found the exit by accident, a door that opened onto a narrow alley behind a restaurant. The rain hit her face, cold and clean, and she stood there breathing it in, letting the city noise wash over her. Car horns, voices, the hiss of tires on wet pavement, real things, normal things. "Miss Olson," she spun. The king stood in the doorway, his white hair already damp from the rain. He had not bothered with a coat. "Your Majesty." She tried to curtsy and nearly fell. Her feet screamed in protest. He caught her elbow, steadying her. "You are injured. Just blisters." He frowned, a tiny crease appearing between his brows. "You should not have danced in pain. I didn't have a choice." "There is always a choice. Not when 300 years of peace depend on it." He looked at her for a long moment, his pale eyes unreadable. "You chose to dance alone rather than let the compact fail." "Yes." "Why?" "Because people would die if it failed. The hunting rights would revive. The court would be within its legal authority to take human prey within city limits. It would be a bloodbath. You read the terms carefully. My grandfather made sure I understood what was at stake." The king's expression shifted, something almost like approval flickering across his face. "He taught you well. He should have been here." "Yes." The word was quiet. "I am sorry for your loss." Brenna swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. No one had said that to her tonight, not even Marcus, who had known her grandfather for years. "Thank you. I will ensure you have transportation home." He released her elbow and stepped back. "Wait." She did not know what made her say it. "Why did you dance with me?" He paused. The rain fell between them, cold and relentless. "Because you deserved a partner," he said finally, and walked back into the court without looking back. The car that arrived was sleek and black, driven by a human in a dark suit who opened the door for her and did not speak. Brenna climbed in and gave her address, a small apartment in Capitol Hill that she shared with 2 roommates who thought she was attending a formal dinner for her graduate program. She leaned her head against the window and watched the city slide past, lights blurred by rain. Her phone buzzed, a text from her roommate asking how the dinner went. She typed back a response that was not quite a lie and let her eyes close. She could still feel the king's hand on her waist, cool and steady. She could still see his face in the candlelight, expressionless and remote. "Because you deserved a partner." She did not know what to do with that. The first committee meeting happened in a conference room that looked like it had been furnished in 1890 and never updated. Long table, high-backed chairs, portraits on the walls of vampires whose names Brenna did not know. She arrived early, escorted by the same silent driver, and found herself alone with a stack of documents 3 inches thick. She started reading. The compact was more complex than she had imagined. It covered hunting rights, territorial boundaries, legal jurisdiction over crimes involving both species, property ownership, and a dozen other issues she had never considered. The language was archaic and dense, full of clauses that referenced earlier treaties and addendums that contradicted each other. She was on page 47 when the door opened. The king entered first, followed by Lilith and 3 other vampires she did not recognize. Marcus came last, looking harried and carrying a briefcase that bulged at the seams. Everyone took their seats. The king sat at the head of the table. Brenna found herself directly across from him, close enough to see the way the lamplight caught in his eyes. "We will begin," Lilith said, with a review of the current terms. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Brenna took notes on her laptop, trying to follow arguments that twisted through legal precedents she had never heard of and historical events that predated the city itself. The vampires spoke in low, measured tones, their words precise. Marcus interjected occasionally, usually to clarify a point or ask for definitions. The king said nothing at all. Brenna noticed that the others deferred to him anyway. They would pause before speaking, glancing in his direction as if waiting for permission. When he shifted in his chair, they stopped talking. His presence shaped the room without him speaking a word. The human representative has been silent, Lilith observed, turning to look at Brenna. Do you have thoughts on the matter of hunting territory expansion? Brenna looked up from her notes. I think expanding the court's designated feeding grounds into residential neighborhoods is a terrible idea. Silence. The proposal, Lilith said carefully, is limited to areas with high transient populations, individuals who would not be missed. Everyone is missed by someone, Brenna said, and even if they weren't, you're asking the city to officially sanction hunting in areas where people live. That's not peace. That's predation with a permit. One of the other vampires, a man with silver rings on every finger, leaned forward. The current feeding grounds are insufficient for our population. We require access to more territory, or the compact becomes unsustainable. Then we need to talk about alternatives to hunting, Brenna said. Blood banks, willing donors, medical partnerships. There are options that don't involve expanding your right to kill people. Those options are beneath our dignity, the man said coldly. Then your dignity is going to cost lives. Enough. The king's voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. He had not raised his voice, but everyone fell silent immediately. He looked at Brenna. What do you propose? She took a breath. A pilot program. Voluntary human donors, screened for health and compensated fairly. We could start small, see if it meets the court's needs. If it works, it could replace hunting entirely. The court does not pay for blood, the man with the ring said. Then the compact will fail eventually, Brenna replied. Because the city will not agree to expanded hunting rights, I can promise you that. The king's gaze had not moved from her face. We will consider the proposal, add it to the agenda for next week's session. Lilith made a note. The man with the rings looked like he wanted to argue, but he subsided when the king glanced at him. The meeting adjourned 20 minutes later. Brenna packed up her laptop, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. She had just argued with vampires about their feeding habits. She was either very brave or very stupid, and she was not sure which. Miss Olson. She looked up. The king stood beside her chair. Up close she could see the fine texture of his coat, dark wool tailored with precision. He smelled like cold air and something else, something she could not name. Yes, Your Majesty. You spoke well. I probably made enemies. You made your position clear. That is more valuable. He paused. The donor program is a reasonable suggestion. Do you think the council will agree to it? Eventually. They resist change, but they are not fools. The alternative is conflict, and conflict serves no one. How long have you been king? The question slipped out before she could stop it. 432 years. Brenna tried to wrap her mind around that and failed. That's a long time. Yes. Do you ever get tired of it? His expression shifted, something unguarded passing across his face before he caught it. Every day. She did not know what to say to that. He had already turned away, moving toward the door with that impossible grace. She watched him go and wondered what it must be like to rule for centuries, to negotiate the same treaties with the same arguments year after year, to be responsible for every vampire in the court, and never able to step away. Marcus appeared at her elbow. That went better than I expected. Really? I thought I was about to start a war. You were direct. They respect that. He started gathering papers. The next meeting is scheduled for Thursday. Can you make it? I'll be there. She would have to be. She was the sworn keeper now, whether she had wanted the job or not. The meetings became routine. Every Thursday at 7, Brenna descended into the court and spent hours arguing about clauses and subclauses, hunting rights and territorial boundaries, legal definitions and historical precedents. She learned the names of the council members, their positions and their politics. She learned which arguments worked and which only made things worse. She learned that the king never spoke unless he had something essential to say, and when he did speak, everyone listened. She also learned that he was watching her. She would feel his gaze during meetings, a weight against her skin that made her hyper-aware of every word she chose. She would glance up and find him looking at her, his expression unreadable, his pale eyes steady. He never looked away when she caught him. He simply held her gaze until she broke first, heat climbing her neck. It was unnerving. It was also, in a way she did not want to examine too closely, thrilling. February arrived. The negotiations stalled over a dispute about legal jurisdiction. March came, and they were still arguing about which courts had authority over crimes that crossed the human-vampire boundary. Brenna spent her days in class and her evenings in the library, researching case law and historical treaties, trying to find precedents that would support the city's position. She barely slept. Her roommates asked if she was okay. Her advisor asked if she needed an extension on her thesis. She said no to both and kept working. In early April, someone tried to kill her. She was waiting for the tram after a late class, standing under the shelter with her bag over her shoulder and her phone in her hand. The platform was empty. It was nearly midnight, and the rain had driven everyone else inside. She heard the footsteps behind her and turned. The vampire was young, or looked young, with white hair cropped short and eyes that gleamed red in the streetlight. He moved fast, faster than her eye could follow, and his hand was around her throat before she could scream. "The compact will fail," he hissed, his breath cold against her face. "You will not renew it. You will not change us." She clawed at his hand, gasping. Her vision started to darken, and then he was gone. She collapsed against the shelter wall, coughing. The king stood 3 feet away, holding the young vampire by the back of the neck like a disobedient kitten. His expression was terrible, cold and furious in a way that made her instinctively step back. "You will go before the council," the king said, his voice very soft. "You will confess your crime. You will accept your punishment. Do you understand?" The young vampire was shaking. "Yes, Majesty." "Go." He released him, and the vampire fled, moving faster than Brenna could track. The king turned to her. The fury faded from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. "Are you hurt?" "I don't think so." Her voice came out hoarse. Her throat ached where the vampire had grabbed her. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and tilted her chin up, examining her neck with the careful attention of a surgeon. His touch was cool and gentle. "You will bruise. I'll live. You should not have been alone. I was coming home from class. I didn't think I needed a bodyguard." His jaw tightened. "You do now. I can't live my life surrounded by guards." "Then you may not live your life at all." He released her chin, but he did not step back. "The compact has enemies within the court. Tonight proves it. They will try again. Who was he? A young fool who listens to the wrong voices." The king's gaze moved past her, scanning the empty platform. "There is a faction that opposes the renewal. They believe the compact weakens us, that we should return to the old ways. They see you as the symbol of everything they despise. Great. I will not allow them to harm you." "Why do you care?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "You barely know me." He looked at her, his pale eyes catching the streetlight. "I know that you danced alone rather than fail your duty. I know that you argue for what is right even when it makes you enemies. I know that you work until you are exhausted trying to make this compact something better than it was." He paused. "That is enough." The tram arrived, bright and warm and ordinary. The doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. "Come," the king said. "I will escort you home." He rode the tram with her, standing near the door with his hands clasped behind his back, ignoring the stares of the few late-night passengers. He walked her to her apartment building, up the 3 flights of stairs to her door, and waited while she unlocked it. "I will assign guards," he said. They will remain out of sight, but they will be present. Okay. If you see anything suspicious, call me. He handed her a card with a phone number written in careful script. Any time, day or night. She looked at the card, then at him. Thank you. He inclined his head and turned to go. Your Majesty? He stopped. What's your name? He looked back at her, and something in his expression softened. Eryx. Eryx, she repeated. It suited him, old and strong and a little bit dangerous. Good night, Brenna. He left before she could respond, descending the stairs in silence. She went inside and locked the door, her hands still shaking. She touched her throat, feeling the tender places where the bruises would bloom. Someone had tried to kill her. Someone wanted the compact to fail badly enough to murder her on a tram platform. And the king, Eryx, had saved her. She looked at the card in her hand, at the number written in ink that looked like it came from a fountain pen. Call me. Any time. She put the card in her wallet and tried not to think about how much she wanted to use it. The guards were invisible, but she knew they were there. She would catch glimpses sometimes, a figure in the shadows across the street, a presence that moved when she moved. It should have been unsettling. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. The council met in emergency session to address the attack. The young vampire confessed and was sentenced to 50 years of exile. Lilith issued a formal apology to Brenna on behalf of the court, her words stiff and correct. Eryx said nothing during the session, but Brenna felt his gaze on her the entire time, steady and watchful. The negotiations resumed. They were making progress now, real progress. The donor program had been approved on a trial basis, with volunteers recruited through a partnership with the city's main hospital. The territorial boundaries had been redrawn to everyone's grudging satisfaction. The legal jurisdiction question was still unresolved, but they were close to a compromise. Brenna started staying late after the meetings, working through details with Marcus while the council members filed out. Eryx always left last, and he always paused at the door to look back at her. She started looking forward to those moments. In May, she found him in the library. She had come looking for a specific treaty from 1823, something Marcus had mentioned in passing. The court's library was vast, shelf after shelf of books and documents that stretched back centuries. She was lost within 10 minutes. Eryx was sitting at a table near the back, reading by lamplight. He looked up when she entered. Miss Olson. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You did not. He closed the book, marking his place with a ribbon. Are you looking for something? The 1823 treaty. Marcus thought it might have language we could use for the jurisdiction question. Third row, top shelf, bound in red leather. She blinked. You have the whole library memorized. I have had time to become familiar with it. She found the book where he said it would be and brought it back to the table. May I? Of course. She sat across from him and started reading. The treaty was exactly what she needed, full of clear precedents for shared legal authority. She made notes on her phone, her mind already working through how to apply this to their current negotiations. You enjoy this, Eryx said. She looked up. What? The work, the research, you enjoy it. I do, she admitted. I like solving problems. I like finding ways to make things fit together that seemed impossible. You should have been a diplomat. I'm studying urban planning. It's not that different, really. Cities are just treaties between people about how to share space. He tilted his head slightly, considering. I had not thought of it that way. How do you think of it? Cities are organisms. They grow and change and adapt. They are shaped by the people who inhabit them, but they also shape those people in return. He paused. The court has watched Seattle grow from a settlement of a few hundred to a city of nearly 1 million. The changes are remarkable. Do you miss how it was before? Sometimes, but nostalgia is a trap. The past was not better, only familiar. She studied his face, trying to see past the marble stillness to whatever lay beneath. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone colder, more distant. You're a vampire king. I thought you would be. She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Monstrous. Inhuman. I am inhuman. You know what I mean. His expression shifted, something almost like a smile touching his mouth. Yes, I know what you mean. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both reading. Brenna found herself glancing at him between paragraphs, watching the way the lamplight caught in his white hair, the elegant stillness of his hands as he turned pages. "What are you reading?" she asked finally. He turned the book so she could see the cover. Poetry. Rumi. In the original Persian. You read Persian? I read many languages. When you live long enough, you have time to learn. Is it good? The poetry, I mean. He read aloud, his voice low and musical, the syllables unfamiliar but beautiful. Then he translated, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray." That's lovely. Yes. He closed the book carefully. I have always found it to be true. She wanted to ask what he loved, what drew him, but the question felt too intimate. Instead, she went back to her notes and tried to ignore the way her heart was beating faster than it should. June brought a heat wave. The negotiations moved to a larger room with better ventilation, and Brenna showed up in a sleeveless dress that her roommate had insisted made her look professional. Marcus raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Eryx noticed. She saw his gaze flicker over her just once before he took his seat. He did not look again, but she felt his awareness of her like a physical touch. They were arguing about enforcement mechanisms when Lilith brought up the technicality. "The dance was performed under duress," she said, her tone casual. The human representative was alone and desperate. The king's participation, while noble, may not have been freely chosen on her part. Marcus frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that the renewal may be invalid. The right requires a willing partnership. If Miss Olson was coerced by circumstance, then the compact has not been properly renewed." Brenna felt the room shift, tension crackling through the air like static. "I wasn't coerced. You were alone in a room full of vampires facing the collapse of a 300-year treaty. You would have danced with anyone who offered. That doesn't mean I was coerced. It means I was doing my job. A job you inherited weeks after your grandfather's death. A job for which you were not prepared." Lilith's amber eyes were sharp. "I am not questioning your commitment, Miss Olson. I am questioning whether the rite was performed correctly." "The rite was performed exactly as the compact specifies," Marcus said. "One human, one vampire, 3 dances. The terms were met. By an unsanctioned partner. The king is not a court representative. He is the court itself. The distinction matters." "Then you should have raised this objection 6 months ago," Brenna said. "I am raising it now." Eryx spoke, his voice cutting through the argument with absolute authority. "The objection is noted. We will research the precedents and reconvene next week." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Everyone filed out. Brenna stayed in her chair, trying to process what had just happened. Lilith was challenging the renewal on a technicality. If she succeeded, everything they had worked for would collapse. The compact would lapse. The hunting rights would revive. People would die. "Brenna." She looked up. Eryx stood beside her, his pale eyes grave. "She's going to destroy the compact," Brenna said. "She is going to try. Can she succeed? I do not know. The law is complex. There may be precedents that support her position. What do? We fight." He pulled out a chair and sat, close enough that their knees almost touched. "Lilith represents a faction within the court that believes the renewal goes too far. They do not want the donor program. They do not want shared legal authority. They want the old compact, the one that gave us free rein and asked nothing in return. That compact was a hunting license. Yes, and it suited us well for a very long time." He paused. "But times change. The city has grown. The humans are no longer scattered settlements that we can prey upon without consequence. We must adapt, or we will be destroyed." "You believe that?" "I have believed it for 2 centuries. I have simply been waiting for the opportunity to act on it." Brenna looked at him, at the ancient being who had ruled longer than her country had existed. "Why did you dance with me that night?" "Because you were dancing alone and you should not have been." "That's not an answer." His gaze held hers. "Because you were brave and terrified and determined to do the right thing, even when it cost you everything. Because you reminded me that there are still things worth fighting for." He paused. "Because I wanted to." Her breath caught. She could not look away from him, from the intensity in his pale eyes, the truth in his words. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Yes? I'm staying human deliberately. The compact requires a living human keeper. If I turn, I can't do the job anymore. I can't be the sworn representative." "I know." "You know? You are very careful about what food you accept from the court. You do not drink anything that is not sealed. You keep your distance from any vampire who seems too interested." His mouth curved slightly. "You are protecting yourself from accidental turning. It is wise. I want to do this job. I want to see the compact renewed properly. I want to build something better. Then we will build it. Together?" "Yes." She smiled, feeling something tight in her chest loosen. "Okay." They worked together after that, spending long hours in the library going through old treaties and legal documents, looking for precedents that would counter Lilith's argument. Marcus helped, bringing in legal experts from the city. They built their case carefully, piece by piece. Eryx was brilliant. He knew the history intimately, every treaty and every negotiation, and he could cite case law from memory. But more than that, he understood the politics. He knew which council members could be swayed and which were immovable. He knew how to frame arguments to appeal to different factions. He also made terrible coffee. Brenna discovered this one night when he offered to brew a pot. She took one sip and nearly choked. "How did you make this so bad?" she asked, staring at the cup. "I followed the instructions on the machine." "This tastes like motor oil mixed with regret." He looked genuinely puzzled. "I do not drink coffee. I was attempting to be helpful." "Stick to what you're good at." "Ruling an immortal court?" "Exactly." He almost smiled. She was learning to read his expressions, the tiny shifts that meant amusement or approval or consideration. He was not cold. He was careful, guarded in a way that came from centuries of needing to be. But with her, he was starting to let the guard down. She caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she was focused on her work. She would look up and find his gaze on her face, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "What?" she asked once. "You bite your lip when you are concentrating." "Do I?" "Yes. Here." He reached out and touched the corner of her mouth very gently. She froze. His finger was cool against her skin, his touch feather light. He held it there for a heartbeat, 2, and then withdrew. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be." Their eyes met. Something passed between them, unspoken and electric. Marcus walked in carrying a stack of files, and the moment broke. Eryx stood smoothly. "I will review the 1745 precedents. Brenna, you should focus on the jurisdictional arguments." "Right. Yes." She watched him leave, her heart pounding. The hearing was scheduled for late July. Lilith presented her case first, arguing that the rite had been performed invalidly, that Brenna had been under duress, that Eryx's participation as king rather than court representative created a legal ambiguity that invalidated the renewal. Marcus countered with historical precedents showing that kings had danced the measure before, that the compact did not specify the rank of the vampire partner, only that a partnership must occur. Brenna testified about her decision to dance, about her understanding of the rite and her willing participation. She spoke clearly and calmly, even when one of Lilith's allies tried to rattle her with aggressive questions. Eryx said nothing. He sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, and listened. The council debated for 3 hours. Finally, they called for a vote. The renewal was upheld by a margin of 2 votes. Lilith accepted the decision with icy grace, but Brenna could see the anger beneath the surface. "This is not over," Marcus said quietly as they left the chamber. "I know." But it was a victory, and she would take it. Eryx found her later, in the hallway outside the library. Well done. You didn't say anything during the hearing. I did not need to. You spoke well enough for both of us. I was terrified. You did not show it. I've had practice hiding how I feel. He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You should not have to. Not here. Here is a negotiation table surrounded by people who want me to fail. Not all of them. No, I do not want you to fail. I know. They stood in the hallway, close enough that she could have reached out and touched him. The court was quiet around them, most of the council having left after the hearing. I need to tell you something, Eryx said. Okay. I am not good at this. At what? At feeling. He stopped, clearly struggling with the words. I have been alone for a very long time. Closeness is dangerous when you are king. People use it as a weapon. I learned to keep my distance. I understand. I do not think you do. He met her gaze, and there was something raw in his eyes, something vulnerable. I am trying to tell you that I have feelings for you, that I have had them since the night you danced alone, that watching you work and fight and refuse to give up has only made them stronger. Brenna's breath stopped. I know it is impossible, he continued. I know you are human and I am not. I know you have chosen to remain human for the work, and I would not ask you to change that. I know I should not feel this way, but I do, and I thought you should know. She stared at him, her mind spinning. Eryx, you do not have to say anything. I only wanted to be honest. I need to tell you something too. He waited. I've been falling for you for months, since you started showing up in the library, since you read me Persian poetry, since you made terrible coffee and looked so confused about why it was bad. She took a breath. Since you saved my life at the tram stop and told me I deserved a partner. His expression transformed. It was like watching ice crack to reveal something bright and warm beneath. You have feelings for me, he said slowly, as if testing the words. Yes, even though I am a vampire. Because you're you. The vampire part is just context. He laughed, a surprised sound that she had never heard from him before. It changed his entire face, made him look younger and less guarded. I do not know what to do with this, he admitted. Neither do I. But you would like to try. Yes. He reached out carefully and took her hand. His skin was cool and smooth, his grip gentle. Then we will try together. She laced her fingers through his and felt something settle into place, like a puzzle piece finding its home. They kept it quiet at first. The negotiations were too delicate, the political situation too fraught. If the council knew that Eryx had feelings for the human representative, it could be used against them both. But they stole moments when they could. Late nights in the library after everyone else had gone, walks through the court's gardens, underground spaces lit with soft light where flowers grew without sun, conversations that started about treaty law and drifted into stories about their lives. She told him about her childhood, about growing up knowing she was part of the sworn bloodline, but not understanding what it meant, about her grandfather's patient lessons, his insistence that the compact mattered, that peace was worth any effort. He told her about the early years of the court, about arriving in the Pacific Northwest when it was still wilderness, about building the first chambers beneath the earth while the humans above built their settlements, about centuries of negotiations and compromises and careful distance. I was not always king, he said one night. They were sitting in the garden on a stone bench surrounded by white roses that bloomed in the lamplight. I was elected by the council when the previous ruler fell to madness. I did not want the position. Why did you take it? Because someone had to, and I was the only one strong enough to unite the factions. He paused. That was 432 years ago. Sometimes I forget what it was like to be anything else. What do you want to be? I do not know. I have not thought about it in so long. She leaned against his shoulder, careful and deliberate. He went very still, then slowly put his arm around her. Is this all right? He asked. More than all right. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just being close. August came. The donor program was declared a success, with enough volunteers to meet the court's needs. The territorial boundaries were finalized. The legal jurisdiction question was resolved through a compromise that created joint courts for cross-species crimes. They were close now, so close to having a renewal that worked, that built something better than what had existed before. And then the sabotage started. Small things at first. Documents that went missing, meetings that were scheduled incorrectly, volunteers for the donor program who suddenly withdrew without explanation. Then larger things. A fire in the records room that destroyed historical documents they needed for verification. A donor who became ill after giving blood, raising questions about the screening process. A human councilman who received death threats warning him away from supporting the renewal. Eryx tightened security. He assigned more guards to Brenna, visible ones now, who escorted her everywhere. He launched an investigation into the sabotage, but the perpetrators were careful, leaving no trail. Lilith denied any involvement, but Brenna did not believe her. She wants the renewal to fail, Brenna said. They were in Eryx's study, a private room she had never seen before. It was smaller than she expected, lined with books and lit by a single lamp. Personal. She wants the old compact restored, Eryx agreed. She believes the court is weakened by cooperation with humans. She is not alone in that belief. What happens if we can't stop the sabotage? Then we finish the renewal anyway and accept that there will be opposition. He looked at her, his pale eyes serious. Brenna, I need to ask you something. Okay. This work is dangerous. It will continue to be dangerous. The renewal will create enemies, and they will target you because you are human and vulnerable. Are you willing to continue? Yes. Without hesitation? I knew the risks when I danced alone in that ballroom. They haven't changed. They have increased significantly. So have the stakes. She met his gaze. I believe in this, Eryx. I believe we can build something better. I'm not walking away. He crossed the room and took her hands in his. Then I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. I know. I mean it, Brenna. I will not let them hurt you. She could hear the fierceness in his voice, the absolute conviction. He meant every word. I trust you, she said simply. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her heart ache. I have lived for 6 centuries, he said quietly. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have negotiated treaties and fought wars. I have ruled the court through crisis after crisis. He paused. But I have never cared about anything as much as I care about you. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the cool smoothness of his skin. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, true and irreversible. I love you too, he said, and kissed her. His lips were cool and gentle, careful in a way that made her want to cry. She kissed him back, threading her fingers through his white hair, feeling the solid reality of him against her. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I do not know how this will work, he admitted. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. You are determined to remain human. I am determined to be the sworn keeper. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? The compact requires a living human in the role, but it doesn't say how long. Once the renewal is finished and ratified, once the new treaty is in place and stable, she trailed off, not sure how to finish. You would consider turning? I would consider a lot of things, for you. His arms tightened around her. I would never ask you to change for me. I know. That's why I'm offering. We do not have to decide now. No, but I wanted you to know it's a possibility. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she lost herself in it, in the feel of him and the taste of him, and the impossible fact that she was in love with a vampire king. September brought the final push. The treaty was drafted, all 800 pages of it, incorporating everything they had negotiated over the past 9 months. It was revolutionary, Brenna thought. It created real partnership between the court and the city, shared governance and shared responsibility. It just needed to be ratified. The council would vote first, then the city council. Both had to approve for the renewal to take effect. The sabotage intensified. Someone broke into Marcus's office and destroyed his files. Someone spread rumors that the donor program was failing, that vampires were hunting humans illegally. Someone sent a letter to the newspaper claiming that the court was planning to overthrow the city government. None of it was true, but the damage was real. Support for the renewal began to waver. Eryx called an emergency council meeting. Brenna attended, sitting beside Marcus while the council argued. Lilith stood and addressed the room. This treaty is a mistake. It binds us to human laws and human limitations. It makes us weak. It makes us civilized, Eryx said coldly. There is a difference. Civilization is a cage. Civilization is survival. The world has changed. Humans have technology and numbers we cannot match. If we continue as we have been, we will be discovered and destroyed. The renewal gives us a path forward. A path that requires us to bow to human authority. A path that requires cooperation. That is not the same as subjugation. You speak of cooperation, but what you mean is surrender. Lilith turned to the rest of the council. The king has been compromised by his feelings for the human representative. He cannot see clearly. Silence fell like a stone. Brenna felt every eye in the room turn to her. Is this true? One of the council members asked. Eryx stood. His voice was quiet and absolutely certain. Yes. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. I have feelings for Brenna Olson, Eryx continued. I am not ashamed of them, and I will not hide them. But my feelings do not change the facts. The renewal is necessary. The treaty is sound. We will vote on its merits, not on my personal life. Your personal life affects your judgment, Lilith said. My judgment is the same as it has been for 200 years. The court must adapt or perish. I have always believed this. Meeting Brenna has only confirmed it. Then you should recuse yourself from the vote. No. The word rang through the chamber. I am king, Eryx said. I will not abandon my responsibilities because they have become complicated. We will vote, and we will vote honestly. He sat down, and Brenna wanted to reach for his hand, but did not dare. The council was watching too closely. The debate raged for hours. Finally, they called for a vote. The renewal passed by a single vote. Lilith walked out without a word. Brenna let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. We did it. Half of it, Marcus said. The city council votes next week. They'll approve it. They have to. But she was not as certain as she sounded. The city council met on a Tuesday evening. Brenna attended with Marcus, sitting in the public gallery while the council debated. Eryx could not be there. It would be too provocative, but she knew he was watching somehow. The discussion was long and contentious. Several council members expressed concerns about giving the court too much authority. Others worried about the donor program and the legal jurisdiction compromise, but in the end they voted to approve. The renewal was ratified. Brenna felt tears prick her eyes. They had done it. After a year of work, after sabotage and attacks and endless negotiations, they had built something new. Marcus hugged her, laughing. We actually pulled it off. We did. She looked around for Eryx and found him standing at the back of the chamber. He must have slipped in during the final debate. Their eyes met across the room, and he smiled. She made her way through the crowd to him. Hi. Hi. We won. Yes. I love you. I love you too. He took her hand, right there in front of everyone, and kissed her palm. The photographer from the newspaper captured the moment, and it was on the front page the next morning. Vampire King and Human Keeper celebrate historic renewal. The picture showed them standing together, her hand in his, both of them smiling. Brenna's phone exploded with messages. Her roommates demanded details. Her advisor asked if she was insane. Her mother, who had not spoken to her in 5 years, called to tell her she was making a terrible mistake. Brenna ignored all of it and went to the court. Eryx was waiting for her in the garden. He pulled her into his arms and held her close. "They know," she said. "Everyone knows." "Does it bother you?" "No." He pulled back to look at her. "Does it bother you?" "No." "Good." They stood among the white roses, holding each other while the court whispered around them. The implementation of the new treaty took months. Committees had to be formed, procedures had to be established, training had to be conducted. Brenna worked closely with the court, helping to smooth the transition. She also spent more time with Eryx, now that they did not have to hide. They went out together, to restaurants and theaters, to art galleries and concerts. Seattle learned to get used to the sight of the Vampire King walking hand in hand with a human woman. Some people stared, some people whispered. A few sent hate mail. Brenna did not care. She had never been happier. In December, on the anniversary of the dance, the court held a celebration. It was formal and grand, held in the same ballroom where Brenna had danced alone a year ago. This time, she was not alone. Eryx led her onto the floor, and they danced the same waltz she had struggled through by herself. But now she knew the steps. Now she had a partner who moved with perfect grace, who guided her through turns with effortless precision. The crowd watched, human and vampire together, and when the music ended, they applauded. Eryx bowed. Brenna curtsied. "I have something to ask you," he said quietly. "Yes?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple and beautiful, a silver band with a single diamond. "Marry me." She stared at him. "What?" "The treaty creates legal recognition for cross-species partnerships. We could be the first." He paused. "If you want to be." "You want to marry me?" "I want to spend my life with you, however long that is, in whatever form it takes." He was still holding the ring, his hand steady. "Will you marry me, Brenna?" "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her while the ballroom erupted in applause. They were married in March, in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. Brenna wore white. Eryx wore black. Marcus officiated, reading from the new treaty's partnership provisions with tears in his eyes. The reception was held in the court, with guests from both worlds. It was chaotic and beautiful and perfect. Brenna danced with Eryx until her feet hurt, then danced some more. "I love you," she said, her head on his shoulder. "I love you too." "Are you happy?" He pulled back to look at her, his pale eyes warm. "Yes, are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." "Good." They danced as the celebration swirled around them, Vampire King and Human Keeper, partners in every sense of the word. The months that followed were full. Brenna finished her graduate degree and took a position with the city planning department, working on integration projects between human and vampire communities. Eryx continued to rule the court, but now he had someone to come home to, someone who understood the weight of his responsibilities and loved him anyway. They talked about the future, about what it would look like. Brenna was still human, and she was still the sworn keeper. But the role was changing. The treaty had created deputy positions, humans who could share the work. She would not have to do it alone forever. "I've been thinking," she said one night. They were in their quarters, a suite of rooms in the court that Brenna had filled with books and plants and proof that someone lived there. About turning. Eryx looked up from the report he was reading. "Tell me." "I want to do this job for a while longer, maybe another 10 years. I want to see the treaty take root, make sure it's stable." She paused. "But after that, I don't want to leave you. I don't want to grow old while you stay the same. I want time with you, real time, not just a handful of human years." "You would turn for me?" "I would turn for us." He set the report aside and pulled her into his lap. "You are certain?" "Not yet, but I'm getting there." "Then we have time to decide." "Yes." He kissed her, and she leaned into it, into him, into the impossible life they were building together. 5 years later, Brenna stepped down as sworn keeper. She had trained her successor, a young woman named Sarah, who had the same fierce determination Brenna had brought to the role. The treaty was stable, the partnership between court and city thriving. Brenna was ready, Eryx turned her on a winter night in their quarters, with Sarah as witness. It was gentle and careful, and hurt less than she had feared. She fell asleep human and woke up something else. The world looked different, sharper, brighter. She could hear things she had never noticed before, the whisper of air through the ventilation, the rustle of fabric, the slow beat of Sarah's heart. Eryx was there when she opened her eyes. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Strange, good, different." "You are beautiful." She got up and looked in the mirror. Her skin was paler, her eyes brighter. Her hair had taken on a white gold sheen. "I look like you now," she said. "You look like yourself." She turned to him, and he pulled her close. "No regrets?" he asked. "None." They had decades together now, centuries if they were lucky. Time to build and grow and love. The court held a reception to celebrate her turning. It was smaller than their wedding, more intimate. Sarah was there, along with Marcus and a few close friends. They toasted to new beginnings and old promises kept. Brenna and Eryx slipped away early, escaping to the garden where they had first admitted their feelings. "Do you remember the night you told me you loved me?" Brenna asked. "I remember every moment with you. Even the terrible coffee? Especially the terrible coffee." She laughed, and he kissed her, and they stood among the white roses while the court carried on without them for once. In the spring, the city held its first Unity Festival, a celebration of the partnership between humans and vampires. It took place on the streets above the court, with booths and music and dancing that lasted until dawn. Brenna and Eryx walked through it together, hand in hand, watching humans and vampires mingle freely. Children ran past, laughing. Music played from a dozen different stages. The smell of food filled the air, rich and complex. "We did this," Brenna said quietly. "You did this. I only helped." "We did it together." "Yes." They stopped at a dance floor that had been set up in the middle of the street. A band was playing something upbeat and modern, and couples were spinning under the lights. "May I have this dance?" Eryx asked, holding out his hand. Brenna took it, remembering another ballroom, another dance. "Always." They moved onto the floor and lost themselves in the music, in each other, in the city they had helped transform. Around them, people stopped to watch. Some recognized them, the vampire king and his wife, the architect of the peace they were celebrating. Others just saw a couple in love, dancing at dusk while the city glowed around them. Both were true. Brenna rested her head on Eryx's shoulder and felt the contentment settle into her bones. She had spent so long working, fighting, negotiating. Now she could simply be with him, in this moment. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." The music played on. The festival continued. And Brenna Olson, who had once danced alone in a ballroom full of watching eyes, danced with her husband in a city that had learned to share the same road and knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.